And hello from the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We welcome you today to today's SEI webcast. Can a cybersecurity parametric cost model be developed? My name is Shane McGraw, outreach team lead here at the Software Engineering Institute, and I'd like to thank you for attending. We want to make today's webcast as interactive as possible, so we will address questions throughout the webcast and again at the end of the talk. We did receive a number of questions prior to today's webcast, and we'll work in some of those as well. And you can submit those questions that you have live in the YouTube chat area. And again, we'll get to as many as we can. Now I'd like to introduce our featured speaker for today. Dr. Christopher Miller is a senior researcher here at the SEI. His expertise is in software metrics, measurement, and estimation of software-intensive systems. His quantitative analysis background is focused on lifecycle cost estimation, evaluating project feasibility measures, establishing performance measurements, and providing analysis for the optimization of systems. Dr. Miller earned a Master of Engineering Management and PhD in Systems Engineering at the George Washington University. Now I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Good afternoon, Chris. All yours.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. I've been with the SEI for a little over 8 years now. And just a few months ago, we were approached by one of our customers with a simple question. Is it possible to develop a parametric cost estimation model? And I happen to be from the SEMA team, the Software Engineering Measurement and Analysis team. And the way Carnegie Mellon and the Software Engineering Institute is set up is there's a software solutions division and then there's a cybersecurity division. I work in the software solutions division. So I'm really not, and I hope not to disappoint anyone right off the bat, but I am not a cybersecurity expert. I'm really someone who's coming at this from being around and being part of multiple developments of cost estimation models and parametric models, not just for the purpose of estimating costs for proposals, but rather for being um, integrated into development teams to determine feasibility as they progress through their life cycle. One of the main questions is, are we ever done, or when are we going to be done? So a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is going to be largely with my experience based off of the Department of Defense programs. And like I said, we're going to get down to investigate whether or not we think a model is even viable. And if it's viable, then would it be valuable? We have our document markings here. So one of the first things, even though the customer did kind of just ask that very simple question, is one, can we actually develop one? Before we invested time to kind of really even look into it, the question was said, well, is it even worth looking into? So we actually did go out and did some literature review, and we did some interviews with decision makers, stakeholders within the Department of Defense, and really found that yes, indeed, there is a need. I mean, there's the fundamental obvious need that we need credible estimates to provide the basis for plans and budgets. And the cost estimation community, if you look at some of the existing parametric models that are out there, at least the ones that have been out there for a while, cyber costs tend to be at the as a cost driver, an individual element, and they really don't add in the fidelity for some of the things. There are a couple of new parametric model that have come out on the market, and they're pretty new. I haven't had the experience to really use them yet, but they are out there, and I'm looking forward to actually rolling my sleeves up with a few of them. The other part of this that we found in our research was really it's not only just how much cost or effort, but how do you build your cyber team? There's various certifications and accreditations that you need to do. Knowledge areas are unique. So in some instances, you might need two people based on their skill sets. In other cases, for that same project, uh, you might find you need three people just because of the knowledge and the talents that are needed to achieve everything that is required with the program. And the last one there, really for the program managers, is you want to have sufficient granularity and insight into the performance of your activities, so that you can evaluate objectively how they're performing. And then if there are proposed alternative courses of action, that you can actually forecast what that impact is going to be to your program. So on the right there, you'll see that there are some quotes from our various results from the research and interviews that we had. And actually, there at the very bottom, Nav C Command does actually built their own special cost model, um, and have expressed interest in working with us to maybe refine that. But they had a very specific need; it wasn't a general model. So um, that's really all I'm going to get into on that one. But it is very interesting um, work that they're doing down there. All right. So really, that comes down to what we want to do is, can we actually develop a model that's reliable, uh, and can get down to the set of activities that we're interested in, the object of interest, like program protection plans or PPPs or ATOs packages, and then overall, is do you actually have a normalized or a consistent set of cyber activities? And from those, we could collect the data that would actually then provide enough uniformity or lack of variation, if you will, to allow us to do the correlation regression analysis necessary to establish a parametric model. So, really, the first step along with that line of thinking is whether it's measurement or estimation or whatever, you first have to clearly understand what is the thing that you're going to measure or estimate. So when we say cybersecurity, one of the things that when I was introduced to this is it means different things to different people. Some people just want to estimate the effort associated with doing a particular activity. Like I said here on the examples, to perform or to authorize a ATO package. And that's 80% of what their organization or their staff does. So they might want to focus on that. In other um, areas, like in for organizations across an entire service, perhaps they might want to know across the breadth of activities that are considered cybersecurity, where are they spending the most money, which ones cost them the most. So in that case, you might need a complete work breakdown structure. So for this activity, we selected two documents here for that to serve as our generic WBS. So the ASF, or the Acquisition Security Framework, is actually a document created by the SEI. Okay, and the other one from ICSI is the Advanced Art of Cyber Cost Estimating. And we did is we used those two things when we were working with the program to say, how much of your cost really depend in this particular area? Where do you think you're spending the majority of your time and effort? Which ones are the hardest ones to define? And which ones do you think are most consistently performed? More consistent, more easier to estimate. Where they're different and they vary all the time, it's much harder to estimate. So what we did is we, of course, did a literature review. Since it's research, and we reached out to all the folks that we knew uh, in industry that we worked with, and we simply just said, how do you do estimating? So actually, Shane, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and poll the crowd that's here today, and have it take a poll and see how the poll results match up to our findings.
Okay, I'm launching that now.
I don't know if I can see the poll or not.
I don't think so, because
Okay.
it's just gonna be on the YouTube side of things, so
Okay.
people start voting here. I'll give you some real-time updates. Right now, 80% apply an activity-based, uh, 17% adjust previous year's budget, 12% use a parametric model,
Oh, wow.
10% apply a percentage of program costs.
Okay. So while those numbers are coming in, let me just kind of cover the contents here of the slide, and then we'll come back and see where they settled out at. Um, in the upper left here, the diagram is a graphic that came out of the original software CMM quite a while ago. And regardless of your experiences with the CMM or the maturity model, the one thing that I really always liked about this as a measurement person or an estimation person is that part on the right there where it says increasing measurement capability. The bottom line for the parametric model is we need data. You need data to actually create your model. So where on the previous slide, when I was talking about our generic WBS or what you consider cybersecurity, is looking at this diagram. Is it just one bucket of money or one team that all charges the same charge number and they kind of have free reign to just do what needs to get done? Or do you actually have explicit tasks that are assigned and that are tracked individually so that you can actually capture that data? The more fidelity, the more granularity you have in your way that you run your cybersecurity activities and your processes, are the greater opportunities to collect data and the greater fidelity that we can build into a model. Um, I did have a question. I know when you registered for the class, you could ask some questions ahead of time. And one of those questions was, well, what is a parametric model? So here at the bottom, just kind of parametric modeling 101, if you will. Parametric modeling is the use of regression and correlation analysis. And if you see here on the right, or on the left rather, if the blue dots represent projects or cyber activities that we have data on, and effort and size. We collect that. You have your data here, and we just use correlation. I'm sorry, regression analysis to plot the line and the blue line, and then we'll go through and we'll actually look at what are the cost drivers, what are the things that are unique, what is the focus, what are the domains of the data? Because not all systems have the same type of cybersecurity activities, or at least the same strengths and weaknesses of certain areas. They don't all have the same level of certification. Some are more stringent. Um, so you'll go in and you'll actually adjust, and that's where the parametric, para being many and metric numbers, but many drivers, many variables. So that's where cost drivers come in. And if we apply that and adjust that, for like you'll see for the example here, we might actually adjust our line. I drew it here as a simple linear for the example, but in reality, it's a nonlinear practice line, typically that follows a Rayleigh distribution for the activities. All right, Shane, how did those numbers fall out?
So 18% apply a percentage of program costs, 36% apply an activity, 32% adjust previous year's budget, and 14% use a parametric model.
Oh, okay. So I'm very intrigued by the 14% parametric model. Like I said, in our research, we found just one organization that was doing it. We did find here that there was kind of a balance between just adjusting last year's numbers and saying, well, I think we're going to need more people. There's a new policy that came out. There's a new standard, new artifacts that need to be produced. S bombs are coming out at us, and we need to do this, that, and the other thing. Um, we typically did see though that there was rarely were these separate line items and actual ways to collect effort uh, and which is then translated into cost. So that was one thing that it's actually encouraging by the survey numbers, because if people are actually able to do the activity based and a parametric, then that they need to have the data in order to do that. So that's encouraging. All right. So kind of part of our can we build, so now that we've established the state of the practice and going back to our question, can we build a cybermetric uh, parametric model? Uh, One of the things that's changed over the time, over the past, what, a few decades, is as continuous engineering. And is never more true with the cybersecurity activities because they're ongoing. They're constantly ongoing. So historically, you would do an estimate, parametric models for cost, for software costs like Kokomo, or um, SEER-SIM for the software, or Price S, or True Planning, or any of those that you might have used or heard of. You would typically see them used a lot for RFPs and for proposals, requests for proposals and proposals, depending on whether you were government or on the commercial side. And you would use those to create your engine, based on a description of the program, the scope and the variables. And you would actually come up with an estimate. And then that estimate would go into your plan or your proposal. Um, and then usually you would want to say, well, if we did a little better productivity, or we actually need to get it done in 15 years when the model said it was going to be 17, or more like months, okay? Whether we need to get done in 2 years versus 3 years, or whatever it might be, you'll see that the little arrow here, the assumptions and constraints, you would go round and round till you eventually had an estimate that could support your goals and objectives, and that would become your plan. Then you would start actually doing work. And then as the work's performed, you would collect actuals, and you could do your plan versus actuals, monitor your performance. And while that's going on, you would also be able to capture that data. Well, that was pretty much where it ended, with the kind of continuous that we want to really get people to pick up a little bit more than they've done in the past, is actively taking the historical data and feeding it back into the estimation activity, making the estimation activity something that's kind of alive and breathing, not a one-time activity on a program that you do it once and then you throw it away. Um, when you don't have data up front, you start with ratios and levels of effort. But over time, as we get this data and potentially analogous data from other programs, then we have the ability to get more sophisticated in our analysis approach. And that's really where the parametric models come in. The other part of this here, down here, the quantify estimation accuracy, if you're familiar with prediction intervals or pred levels, that would be actually tracking your plan versus actual estimates. And then over a series of times, you actually compute how often are we within a certain percent. So am I within 20%, 80% of the time? Am I with 10%, 70% of the time? That actually provides you the insight to know exactly what you need to do to where your variation is experienced in the model, so that you can refine the data that you want to collect. So you can identify which activities are, in terms of effort or cost, are varying, or if they're consistently changing. You can also use that data to trend it if those costs are ever increasing. So it allows you the ability to really be confident in actually telling the people that are using the estimates, your stakeholders, this is how good this estimate number is. And that is something that we at SEI, we just don't see enough of. Usually an estimate's generated, the person's that using it is, well, how good is this? And they rarely have the ability to really kind of articulate quantitatively their confidence in the estimate. Um, they'll talk about their experience and the precision of the model, but really actually performing and using the estimates in terms of their plan is an important step to actually improving your overall parametric modeling capability. All right. Um, Before I go into different modeling approaches, are there any questions, Shane?
We did, as you mentioned, we got a number of questions prior to the webcast. If we could work in one now, be great, Chris. Lee asked, I'm curious how costs may be forecast to incorporate unknown or unexpected changes in future work due to changing security requirements, or similarly, how models can incorporate first-time security efforts.
Right. So it is very true that this approach that I went through is based on the presumption that past performance is the best predictor of future performance. So that does not account for new things or unprecedented things. When I get later in the presentation, I'm going to talk about the difference between subjective and objective data. And in those cases where you have something new or something's coming up, uh, what we found the best way to do is actually get subject matter experts involved, the people that are closest to those activities, and actually do something similar to a Delphi uh, survey where we'll actually go through and we'll get them together. We'll describe the activities and we'll have them, the experts who have done it, or the people that are closest to the activity, uh, give us their inputs, and we'll use their subjective inputs to actually obtain to drive into quantitative rankings. It'll probably start off with some sort of Likert scale, t-shirt sizing, high, medium, low, and then we'll refine it and over time. And that's kind of how you would do that. But that's a good question.
Right.
All right.
All right, we can move on. And like I said, we got a number in the queue, but we'll get back to this, Chris.
Okay. Great. Okay, so now you have a conceptual kind of the ConOps flow of how this thing all needs to work. Let's kind of dig a little further into the estimation approaches. Um, so what we did our study, we didn't see anything existing for this at the time. Uh, and we kind of brainstormed how could we go about doing it. We came up with several ideas. These three kind of floated to the top as the most practical. One was to take a model like Kokomo, if you're familiar with that, where it already has a size input, is there's an existing parametric model with existing algorithms based on real data, and it has cost drivers. And what you could do is you could actually go in and add a cost driver or adjust an existing cost driver to account for cybersecurity activities. So that would be one. And if you really had well, we'll get on it on the next slide, but we'll talk about when that would be appropriate. The other one was if your cybersecurity activity really fell into just one or two or three of those buckets against the WBS, where the majority of your effort was really spent uh, fixing uh, certification packages, or doing PPPs, or doing one particular function associated with cybersecurity, then you wouldn't have to worry about measuring everything. You won't have to nail down everything. You could just focus on measuring those explicit activities. Um, and then activity driven, it would be measuring the entire WBS, uh, and then allowing uh, understanding that you want to get a handle on it. You may not have everything defined today, but by kind of laying out the scope of what you want to have your model do eventually, and then you could start with subjectively filling in the blanks where you don't have data, and where you do have data, actually start doing the statistics, the quantitative analysis to build your estimation equations. So here are those three models with a little bit more granularity or how to break them out. I set them up in three columns here. So it's the amount of effort to stand them up, kind of a high level, what kind of data would you need to do it? What's your inputs? And then your outputs. And I did the outputs in forms of questions that the estimate itself would answer. So if you're really interested mostly in how much effort and costs are associated with cybersecurity, or how much are my cybersecurity costs increasing over year, adding into an existing model as an extension might be the way to go because it's the least amount of effort. And you can do it with some subject matter input. You don't have to be overly precise if you want those high level questions answered. The next one, if you're really just focused on some key products, uh, it's a lot easier to just collect that data, use your descriptive statistics, and that way you can answer the specific questions. In this case, I've said these a couple times, but what's required in an ATO package, how much to develop a PPP, that type of thing. And then the last one, really, it is take a significant amount of effort and a lot of data to collect. You have to do the normalization, especially if you want to be able to use it across programs. I talked a little bit about how we have a continuous need to estimate cost, uh, thinking primarily over a fiscal cycle, but a lot of programs will also change at a more frequent, not quite by sprint, but maybe by integration event. So as they're going through, they may actually make real-time changes to the amount of activities they need. If you want that kind of fidelity, then you would probably want to actually spend the time to do that here. And it does give you, in terms of the outputs, it will actually give you specific costs or efforts for individual cyber activities. So in terms of how the overall, so again, remember this research really started out with just the question, is one feasible? And after we went through everything and we laid that out and we took those models back to the customer that asked the question, and had a couple meetings with them and talked through everything. And they were kind of in the middle of kind of deciding what approach they liked all of the approaches. There was some question about just how much they wanted to delve off into. So we didn't really go past that at this time. But in terms of our study result, we were asked the question, is it feasible? And as you can see in the very top there, yeah, we came to the conclusion that developing a parametric to estimate is feasible, uh, given, okay, the granularity and fidelity of the model depend on the quality of subjective and objective data, as well as the uniformity of the cybersecurity activities, both history matching future. So I read that one specific because we actually took time to write those sentences out to clearly articulate where the weaknesses would be. If you try to just do this, you need to pay attention to the granularity, fidelity, and the quality of the data and how you do it. We created the rest of this diagram to give you an idea of how you might do it if you don't have anything. Uh, if you're familiar with ISO 15939, ISO IEC, IEEE, ISO 15939, we follow over here on the left. When you do measurements, you take it from an entity with attributes, you figure how you're going to measure it, you obtain a number with a base measure, you combine that with some derived measures and actually come up with your analysis model. So in terms of kind of putting the whole thing together, we use that as a backdrop, but starting with the description, oops, I'm sorry. But starting with the description of whether we're doing this, the cyber activity, whether we're doing just only software activities or full entire systems activities. We actually would define that. Then what is the cyber activities associated with the program? What is the effort related to the overall if we're going to reuse or leverage another model? Okay. And then we actually go out and say, now, if we want to refine those, we have to go ask our SMEs based on their experience, have interviews and workshops, uh, obtain from them what they think the actual contributions are going to be from individual activities or the overall. And that helps us refine the cost drivers. Once we have the cost drivers calibrated in the model, as you can see up here, we'll use those and apply them with inside. So this is where we're inside this circle is where we're going to do our regression and correlation analysis with this data to actually generate estimates. And then with the historical data, we can actually obtain that and see how we're doing overall. We could validate it with historical cost drivers. We can do validation of the estimates, and we can do the prediction intervals that we talked about. Have a little key down here to talk about which activities are kind of the system information, the modeling activities versus modeling artifacts that you would want to have. So it kind of helps you think about what you would actually tangible products that you would have as you're doing this activity. Okay. Couple things. If you're going to do that, this is a way of summing up kind of those low level things from the previous chart. You want to make sure that you're collecting data from the same domain, platform, and scope. If you're using it as an extension of another model, you have to make sure you know the systems engineering or software engineering activities. And of course, then the cybersecurity. So this is kind of your high level checklist. You need to be able to collect, get your SMEs together, whether it's formal or informal, collect that data. And then for your objective data, get that down to the lowest level of granularity that you can. Localized is always better. I've worked with a couple organizations where they've used benchmark data and they looked external to the organization, and they usually we're fairly disappointed. Measuring locally is always best, and if you want it to emulate your, if you want it to be a good predictor for you. All right. So that's for the data input for creation and calibration. Now for actually using the model, kind of if you're going to use this on a daily basis or on a semi-frequent basis, I should say, not rarely daily. Um, the systems engineering effort needs to be known, and you have to define your cyber activities. You'll get it output by the same level that you can drill down for the inputs. And we talked about it does assume that if you're doing any of these, that cybersecurity effort is related to the overall percentage of either software or systems engineering. And there are two models out there. The COSISMO one is for the systems engineering model developed by Ricardo Valerdi at University of Southern California. And the COCOMO one is for software. And that is developed again by USC under the late Barry Bain. It has a lot more. In fact, they're coming out with a third increment of that right now. All right. Just a few more, few last minute thoughts here. As we went through this um, research, these are kind of some takeaways that we thought. If you're actually looking for cybersecurity costs, about the cost of performing the cybersecurity um, activities, like in the earlier phases or during development, then you really want to focus on them. And I kind of relate that to baking in cyber to make sure you're doing it. But there is also a set of folks that we talked to in the community that were really focused on what their question was, what is the cost to secure my system? How do I make sure I'm safe from threats? And that's maintaining a secure system. There's slight nuance there, and you want to be clear on what your objective is in the model. What are you trying to predict? What are you trying to cost out? Because you would take a slightly different approach. And whenever I think I've already foreshadowed to this, always start small and local, and consider data availability and staff knowledge and skills. Uh, if you have the cybersecurity skills, you may need help with the parametric modeling. If you have the parametric modeling skills, you're going to need help with the cyber skills. We were lucky enough in our research to work both with our CERT brethren, and when we were mainly from the parametric side. So we had a good sharing of knowledge in both domains. And as I kind of foot stomped when I went through there talking about the prediction intervals, is it is always helpful to go back and look how good of an estimate was I in relationship to actual, even if things changed, even if you know a lot of your ongoing assumptions were um, proved to be false. It's always good practice to go back and look at that and know what that is, especially when you're talking to the stakeholders and the users of your information. And just to add a little bit here at the end, my takeaway box. Uh, I know this saying a lot, but and when I actually looked up to make sure I gave attribution to the right person, it looks like there's two people that are in the running, Mark Twain and Yogi Berra. But it is always dangerous to make forecasts, especially about the future. As one person said to me, "Wow, how good are your forecasts?" And I said, "Well, if I was really good at it, I would play the lottery, or I'd I would figure out some way of other doing it, and I probably wouldn't be trying to take a swag." But we do know that we can get within fairly good certainty for most costs. Again, if you go back a couple slides, if the precision is there in the data and the processes are repeatable. So this is how to contact us for more information. Dr. Nandihira was the other person from the SEMA group that worked with me. Mr. Chris Alberts was within the CERT organization that worked with me. But if you have any more questions or comments, and with that, Shane, I'll toss it back to you for questions.
Yeah, a question from Rick. Chris, do you consider doing calibration training to reduce overconfidence for better estimation? And the follow-up, did you consider using Bayesian methods as well?
Yes and yes. Always calibration. Um, the one of the things that I do before I just jump into doing, because usually most of the existing models to do calibration, it's not a it's not a simple task. It does take some time. So usually I'll do some statistical analysis to see if indeed I expect a variation reduction and an increase in my precision of the estimate. But absolutely, I did not talk about it here, but calibration should definitely be performed. In my other class that I do teach for an estimation, I have a whole section that talks about the usability of models between um, uncalibrated models are good for ballpark estimates, but if you really want to use them for precise planning, you really want to have a calibrated model. So good question. The Bayesian, yes, we actually have another colleague within the SEMA group who kind of concentrates on Bayesian, and we have discussions a lot. So I don't have a lot to add to this particular talk. We did not do it on the cybersecurity task since it was just a high level kind of discussion, but we actually have an entire product called QELS, the quantitative estimation lifecycle method that uses Bayesian concepts very early in the program. And if you're interested in that, Rick, I would let you know that you can download that. It's it's been produced for a little bit, so it might not have everything about the things that have happened in the last few years and with the relationship to Agile and DevSecOps, but the fundamental concepts definitely are there. Good question.
Liz has asked how to calculate saving costs for events that didn't happen. For example, risk reduction efforts.
Yeah, um, it it's next to impossible. I actually did see this question earlier, and I thought, wow, I would definitely want to address it because I've done ROI studies. In fact, if you Google my name, you'll see a couple articles that I've done over my career, specifically on ROI and savings. And you can't estimate really something you didn't do. Um, you have to do it and to quantify the actual uh, cost of not doing bad work, right? So it's very hard. It's very hard to do, and most times, um, in fact, if you do try to estimate the cost saving, um, many of the people that your read your analysis will actually be very eager to dispute it with you. There's just no objective way to estimate something that never happened. I mean, in terms of cost savings, because it's something you're not going to do. You're not going to crash a program on purpose. You're not going to leave vulnerabilities unfixed, or you're not going to leave your exposures there just so that you can measure the impact. But it's a good question. It comes up all the time. And like I said, I did want to kind of address it here. Um, the only comeback to that is, well, what's the cost of, you not knowing it, it's almost a cost of doing business. It's really, do you want to have a secure system or not?
Kevin had a question comment. Aren't the parametric cyber capabilities and models like true planning and SEER proof that it's quote unquote feasible?
Um, that is so when we did the study in True Play, there was I think we kind of proved it was feasible here as well using that same logic, but it wasn't overt. So when we went through the cost drivers at the time, now I would expect that maybe those models might actually add additional cost drivers, but at the time there wasn't cybersecurity explicit uh, things. There were within specifically in SEER within the knowledge bases, you could highlight uh, what kind of life cycle they had to do or what they had to focus on, but it was not actually giving you output in terms of that lower level WBS that we were talking about here. It would just show you a one lump kind of change, similar to the percentage approach.
Okay, Lonnie asks, firstly, it looks like a bit of ML machine learning would be helpful. Secondly, the parametric cost model might be one of the set of models built into an AI ensemble model. Anything for that?
Yeah, both the machine learning and the AI. I'm very interested. So a lot of this is built again, like I said, past performance is the best predictor of future performance assumption. I think those are great uh, things as a researcher that I'm looking forward to keep an eye on. I think we're just scratching the surface with how AI could potentially do this and machine learning as well. We have a whole nother division, uh, well, multiple teams actually working on both machine learning and AI and large language models. And as far as I know, nobody's really tried to apply that specifically to the cost paradigm, the cost estimation piece yet, at least not within my group. There may be others, but I think that's a great question, great thing that we want to kind of monitor. I do expect you'll see some changes, especially giving some of the new directives and policy coming out from the Department of Defense about wanting more continuous engineering, more open systems, more model-based systems. We're going to need that kind of quick turnaround. I think you saw with some of the assumptions I talked about here. They need the data. They need this. That you need the rigor. We really, if you don't have that, it will not surprise me at all if we don't turn to machine learning and AI to maybe fill in some of those gaps, if not large parts of those gaps.
Of course, we got a number of requests if we can make the slides available. So can we maybe make a PDF available, make them available to folks? That's okay.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
From DPC, we're asking, did you distinguish between enterprise cyber versus systems cyber?
Again, I'm not the cyber expert, so I would actually have to go. But I think we did. In terms of your WBS, there were some activities that were system specific. There were some activities that were enterprise oriented as well. Um, Again, if you can define those activities, I'm the as a measurement guy. I'll measure them. So, but I can't give you a direct answer on that. But you can look up both of those references that were on the earlier slide.
Okay, Matt's asked, cost is one thing, but not meaningful to discuss without also understanding the benefit. How do you address this aspect? How do you
I,
estimate the value created from insurance activity?
yeah, I think I talked a little bit to this earlier, but you there with the policies that are out there now, with the systems we're talking about, embedded weapon systems, some of them are very sensitive IT systems. Uh, we have to, you can't not protect them. The cost is too high in terms of threats, uh, and and so I understand the question. I completely get it from a business standpoint, but at the same time, a lot of our policy, especially again in the Department of Defense, when we're talking about adversaries and international threats and things, it's really not. It doesn't override a lot of the conversations that I'm in. It's really kind of a cost of doing business. If you're going to build these systems, they have to be secure. So I don't, I know that's a little bit of a non-answer, but it's one that that's kind of the world I live in.
An earlier one from Brian as well. How does this model fit into existing estimation methods like Stephen McConnell slash construct software estimation
Mhm.
methods? At what
Yeah.
stage in the project's timeline would this model be usable?
Yeah, McConnell's model constructs is a good model. I mentioned a couple of other ones, Kokomo Sierra. It fits right in there with them when I talked about. I just didn't mention all of the models that are out there. Uh, it does it fits right along with it. You would basically open up the model, look at its inherent WBS, and say where is the cyber activities in here that I care about, and are they adequately represented within this model? And then use it accordingly.
Um, One from Noble, and I'm not familiar with these acronyms, so hopefully you are. Are you using cost drivers synonymously for WBSs?
I'm not sure
Okay.
what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure the acronym.
Send me a question. Send me a little bit. Add a few more words to that, and I'd be happy to try.
Yeah. Um, what about again another earlier one? I don't know if you touched on this one. Arila asked, "What framework makes sense to validate such a model? What role will open source play in such a model?"
So the first part of the question, to validate it, I did talk about the pred levels, and that's really how I would go about validating it is being able once I can actually get the I mean, again, we're talking about the future here, so it's not like where we're validating anything precise. There are lots of unknowns. There's a lot of variation that's still from the time you do the estimate till the time you perform the work. It's always going to be variable. It's stochastic in nature. It's not deterministic. So, like hard validation is not ever going to be there. The best we can get there is with the prediction intervals. Is how close are we getting to the value? I want to use words like precision, but that would not be really appropriate in terms of the true definition of precision in this case. But the idea is that we actually look at how usable is the estimate, and that usability can really be answered with that pred level. If I can confidently say that out of my past 12 estimates, they've always been within 10%. Uh, and literally show that that is the validation really for an estimation approach.
One from John, a more scientific approach to measuring the cost of cybersecurity activities seems like a new idea. Does the idea of measuring cybersecurity cost effectiveness represent one way that cybersecurity engineering practice is maturing?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think that's a good observation as a question there. Uh, every day I see more and more coming out of that side, the cybersecurity activities. They're constantly being refined. You see more proof of that in terms of policy coming out and policy and guidance coming out from the Department of Defense. So it's definitely maturing, and it's even becoming more and more important. You can't turn on the news hardly uh, at least once a week or so you hear about some sort of cyber vulnerability either being found or some actual um, attack or something. So it's only going to grow in importance, and I think that actually means that the need to measure it and predict it, and actually we didn't get into it here, but one of the elements of prediction is also accounting for just um, how mature you're doing performing a particular function or how well you're doing it, like whether or not your cybersecurity activities are as effective as they need to be. There's a whole quality aspect of this that we did not get into with this model, but it would definitely be an area for future research.
Jeff had asked, what makes doing a parametric model for cybersecurity unique to doing a model for other areas of concern?
Um, Well, nothing and everything at the same time. I use that parametric approach. I could use it to on doing any activity. In fact, we're dealing with a couple other customers now where we basically take the whole idea of the starting with identifying the activity, collecting the data, doing the correlation regression analysis, and building that up. We do it for new size. A lot of people do not like SLOC. They don't feel it's representative of effort anymore, even though a lot of the models that are out there still run on SLOC, source lines of code. But so what we can do is we'll apply it even to the same old areas, but with new cost drivers to look at it. So so yes, absolutely, you can apply this approach to anything. Uh, it doesn't make it necessarily unique. The only thing that makes it unique is the fact that we did not find evidence of, well, there was no existing model. Uh, I know there's a couple, like I said, there's a couple people that have come out with some interesting models lately. I haven't, if it's come out in the past few months, I may not have actually seen it, but nobody from our research really had one at the time. So that's what made it novel.
A Noble had gotten back to us. WBS stands for work breakdown structure. So
Yes.
the original question was, are you using cost drivers synonymously with work breakdown structures?
No, I am not. No, the cost drivers would be things like um, if you have an experienced team versus a junior team. So there, once you actually have your your WBS of activities, then what makes the difference of one activity to another activity? And so you would collect data, your historical that you would collect, you would say, is this an experienced team versus a junior team. And then it would allow you to actually quantitatively account for the fact that maybe the junior team required more effort than the subject matter team. That's what a cost driver is going to do. It looks at the difference in domains, the difference of levels of certification, whether they're more stringent or not. And so you account for that so that you can adjust your estimate. Usually they come in groups. Like there's usually a set of drivers that are associated with your people or your staff, some about the project overall, some about process performance, and some about the output, the overall quality. If it has to be a certain standard, usually there's questions along those lines or there's a category of cost drivers along those lines.
Can we work on one more question? Then I'll give it to you just for some closing thoughts and maybe where you see the work going, Chris, or anything like that. And then I'll wrap us up for today. But Doug had asked, how do you suggest ensuring that both databases have consistent data elements? Is there a framework or methodology for ensuring rigor in order to avoid skew in the parametric analysis of costs?
Great question. Good one to end on. I think that is a huge problem. I spend so much of my time when I usually meet people, they say, yeah, we have data. And then when I get in there and roll up my sleeves, I find it's a mess. It is not consistently defined. It's not the way that the data is collected is messy. It's not consistent. I can't really, I can't do anything with it in terms of data integrity. So the data integrity is kind of what I'm going to lump your entire question into is is fundamentally important. Is at the basis of all this. If you don't have that underlying data integrity in terms of collecting it and saving it and integrating it, normalizing it, reporting it, yeah, it really affects the usability of your analysis and your modeling results. So, good question, good point. Point was not made before now about that. So I appreciate that.
Any closing comments for you? Maybe where you see this work going, or what your next steps are, and what you're looking to do? Anything?
Yeah. So actually we don't have any planned research to take this forward. Um, like I said, the customer that sponsored this research, I think some of the key inputs that they needed about the maturity of the processes and the definitions, they weren't quite there yet. And they had some higher priority activities that they wanted to spend their research dollars on, and I perfectly think that's a valid response. My feelings weren't hurt. So I do believe though that the AI approach, the machine learning that we talked about, is going to do this largely over the past 3 decades since I've been around. A lot of these models, the Kokomo, the CRSEMs, the price S's, the true plannings, they are existing models that have been there. Like I said, some of them are still using uh, SLOC based uh, size drivers or size inputs. I think that given the continuous nature of engineering with AI, with machine learning, with everything, I predict that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a major change in the way estimates are done. I think that we're going to not just do them at milestones, they're going to be more integrated into everyday management. It's going to get, we're going to go way past kind of the conventions of earned value, where the engineering data is going to get integrated with that to give a more complete picture, especially if we're doing following the software acquisition pathways. Um, so that's definitely something that I predict is we're gonna see a real shift here in the near future. Um, so with that, I'll end. Thank you again for joining us. I appreciate this, and I think that's all I have.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for the discussion today and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. And lastly, we thank you all for attending today as well. Upon exiting, please hit the like button below if you found value and share the archive, which will be the same URL as you watch the stream today. You can subscribe to the SEI's YouTube channel by clicking on the SEI seal in the lower right corner of the video window. Our next webcast will be March 26th, and our topic will be threat hunting, what should keep us up all at night by Dan Roof. Registration information is available on the SCI website now and will be emailed out as well. Any questions from today's event, please email info@sei.cmu.edu. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.